We are in the middle of Giving Tuesday, one of our most important fundraising days at Live Like Rue Foundation. Today, we are spending the day telling the stories of people that we helped. And I'm going to say right now, I think that Jason actually helped more people than we even helped him. He might disagree, but welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Jason had a post that popped up on our support page. For those of you that follow our support page, it's really, the biggest thing is it's not medical advice. Can you post things in there about medical advice? Yes, of course. But a lot of it is personal experiences that people have with their animal when they're going through cancer. And the reason that I made that page and that the board decided that we needed that page is just like me. When I found out that Rue had cancer, I felt so isolated. I felt desperate. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do. I had medical people in my ear. I had other people in my ear, but I really needed a place where I could, ask questions without judgment. And that's really what it is. So Jason, first of all, welcome. And thank you so much for the post. We are going to share a portion of the post in a bit because it has had the most engagement of any post I think that we've ever shared or that has been posted. But before we get to that, can you tell us about Siggy? And I know he meant so much to you, and I'd love to hear more about him and his cancer journey.
Sure. I don't know where to start. He was a special dog. I think maybe everybody thinks this about their dog, but he was just the most beautiful, smartest, and gentle dog I've ever met. He was a part of my family. And I don't know any dog, cat, or human who ever came in contact with him and didn't fall in love with him really quickly. I can tell you just a short little story I had before I got him. An older dog who was a rescue. He'd been abused and traumatized by that. He was really afraid of the world. Literally afraid to go outside. And within a couple of weeks, he was following Siggy around as happy as could be and confident. And that was Siggy. He was a healer. He healed this old dog and he healed me. I miss him, and a whole lot of others do.
I had not spoken to Jason, or I'm not sure if you applied for financial help or got a care package, but your post kind of like popped out of nowhere. I didn't, and a lot of times on the support page, it's people that hear about it from other groups, or it's not necessarily somebody that we have helped or that the person has reached out to. But the way that Jason typed the post, I'm going to cry. You could feel it. Like you could almost put yourself in that moment and say, that's how I felt at that time. And a lot of times we as humans have trouble expressing that, I think, Jason. And that's why so many people, and Jason kind of took us literally right into that point where he had to make a decision whether to euthanize Siggy at that point or take him home for a night and spoil him basically for the night and have his regular vet do it instead of his non-regular vet. And just kind of, you really put us in that moment with you, and not just like in it, but like emotionally in it too. So can you kind of tell me like why did you decide to post that? And was it almost like, cathartic to get it out and send it out to people that probably would understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, it was definitely cathartic. I mean, in the first few days after that, all I could do, all I wanted to do was tell the whole world about Siggy and how much he meant to me. And so it was kind of all I could do. I'm really touched that other people, that it resonated somehow with other people. And for me, it has less to do with me and my ability to express my emotions. Usually, I'm not very good at it. Then it has to do with Siggy and you know how amazing he was. So when I found out he had a really rare and aggressive form of mesothelioma. It's so rare. The kind he had has been documented in about 16 dogs and maybe around 50 humans. So nobody really knew much of anything about what to do or what was going to happen, and I just felt completely lost. And I found the Live Like Rue group, and it was a huge source of comfort and support for me as I went through this really hard journey with him. Um, so it felt like a safe space for me to talk about the experience, and I guess it was also some way for me to give back a little to Live Like Grew, both for that emotional support that the whole Live Like Grew community gave to me, but also for the financial support. I mean, it was I nearly went bankrupt trying to pay for his treatments. I was behind on the mortgage, about to sell the car at some point, and you know, still had to make decisions based on the cost, which felt really terrible. But anyway, yeah, Live Like Grew was a huge help to me in all kinds of ways, and that's kind of why I posted about Ziggy.
Yeah, it really was beautiful. And like I said, he's going to read a portion of it in a bit. But I did want to tell you, I know that we've paid some of your bills. Today we're going to pay the rest of them. I'm going to cry. So I added up what was left, and you may have more, but it's $2,297.76 coming your way. So I know we were able to help with that first half, but I wanted to get you the rest of the money too.
I don't know what to say. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're happy to help.
Maybe my older dog, you know, the one who is still missing, Siggy's gonna have a nice Christmas. So
yes,
thank you.
and we love to hear that when it's all about the dogs. You know, really it is. Okay, Jason. So if you don't mind, I would love for you just to read a portion. So we did. If you want to see the original post, I will post it on our page today. Again, it's simply beautiful the way it's written. You really feel everything deeply. I don't think one person posted a comment on there that was not deeply touched by what he wrote. And I think Jason too, you know, and not to take away from everybody else, but hearing it come from a man too, like a lot of times we see a lot of, you know, females in rescue and foundation work and animal work. So you know, I think that part of it is to see a man kind of let out his feelings a little bit. It meant so much to so many people. They really did feel it. So go for it. I know this is going to be a little bit tough, but we would love to hear you read it.
All right. I'll warn you, I might choke up a little, so bear with me. Yeah, so like I said, I got a whole lot of support from the Live Like Rue community, and I wrote this just a couple days, maybe the day after I lost him, and I really wanted to share it. First, because it was and it is really important to me that Siggy be remembered. But also, I guess I'd like for people who haven't been through this kind of thing to understand a little bit about what it's like. So, okay, here goes. I knew something was wrong when the tech brought him out from his fourth chemo treatment, and he coughed specks of blood onto the floor. But the truth is, I knew something was wrong after the third chemo treatment, when he started coughing even before we got home. Sometimes when he was sleeping next to me, I'd lay my head on his chest and listen to his breathing and try to convince myself that he'd be the one in a million to beat cancer. And It would not, as mesothelioma almost always does, take over his lungs. When we got home from his treatment, Siggy plopped himself down on his bed and coughed some specks of blood onto the blanket that I'd laid there to make it more comfortable for him. I sat at my desk working while he lay there falling in and out of sleep. His breathing was fast and labored. He was coughing more than he had the first time. And after each cough, he would hack and hack. But he just had his fourth dose of chemo a few hours ago, and I was sure that these were side effects. When it was time for dinner, he refused to eat. I offered him a bite by hand, but he turned his head away. After some coaxing from me, he got up and took a few bites, but I knew that Siggy wanted to make me happy more than he wanted to eat, so I dismissed this too as another side effect of the chemo. Later that night, as we did on most nights, I sat next to him on the couch while he slept. This time, though, his breathing was heavy and rapid. Siggy had a mild heart murmur, and I knew that chemo can sometimes affect the heart. Still trying to convince myself that it was anything but the cancer, I started to worry that maybe the chemo had affected his heart. When we got to the emergency room, they took him in, and I waited for a doctor to come tell me that the chemo had, in fact, affected his heart, but they'd prescribed some beta blockers and diuretics, and he'd be fine. When the doctor finally came into the room, I could see bad news all over her face, and my heart sank. She'd done a chest x-ray and consulted with a radiographer, and they both agreed that his heart was just fine. The cancer had spread to his lungs, which were functioning at about 10% capacity, and she recommended immediate euthanasia. I started to cry and said, "But this dog is my heart." She told me she was sorry, but there was nothing she could do. I asked her what would happen if I took him home. She said she didn't think he would make it through the night. I asked her what that would look like, and she said his lips would turn blue and he would suffocate. So they took me to a dimly lit room meant for people who were deciding whether to euthanize their best friends. They brought Siggy in with an oxygen tank and told me he would be more comfortable if I held the end of the tube to his nose. The doctor and a tech came in a few times to ask if I'd made a decision yet. I could tell they were getting impatient as I wavered back and forth. And so I told her finally that I'd prefer to do this with his vet, whom Siggy and I both loved and trusted. She warned me again that she thought this was not the right decision, and they gave me some papers to sign acknowledging that I was ignoring their professional advice, and as the tech said, whatever happened now was on me. Siggy and I lay in bed together one last night. He slept, and although I don't tend to pray a lot, I prayed all night that he would make it until the morning. When the sun came up, he looked at me and rolled over onto his back with his head next to mine like he did every morning. I rubbed his belly like I did every morning, but longer this time, and told him how much I loved him. I called his vet that morning to tell her what had happened, and she scheduled an appointment for that afternoon so that we could make a plan. She asked me to send the x-rays to her in the meantime, and a few hours later, she called to say that she agreed. The cancer had metastasized to his lungs, and there was nothing she could think of that would make him more comfortable. She told me he would get worse fast. She knew how much I loved him, and she was afraid I would regret it if I waited. And so at 3 p.m. that afternoon, I got Siggy ready for one last trip to the vet. His trips to the vet were not usually much fun, but he always somehow knew where we were going, and he'd run down the stairs and straight to the car. But he couldn't run this time. So I carried him down the stairs to the back porch so that we could all say goodbye. He stumbled down the porch stairs into the yard, out of breath, and I sat there with him for a while. My mom's little dog, Loki, whom Siggy had grown to love, circled around him, trying to get him to run and play like they had a million times before. And for a split second, Siggy stood up and tried to run, but then he stopped and lay back down on the ground. I went back to the porch and sat on the floor, crying and dreading and wondering how and why this awful nightmare was happening and if I was doing the right thing. And right at that moment, Siggy struggled up the stairs, came straight to me, and licked my forehead just once, and then he turned around and lay down. I sat on the floor of the vet's office with him. She offered him some chocolate, but he turned his head away. She told me what would happen. He might make some whimpering or growling sounds, but those were just reflexes. He would be asleep and not in pain. And she warned me that his eyes would stay open even after his heart stopped. He sat between my legs while they found a vein in his leg to insert the catheter. He flinched. She administered a sedative and then the propofol. And I held him in my lap. He started snoring for a second or two, and then he went limp. She placed the end of the stethoscope on his chest and listened and said, "I don't hear a heartbeat." And that was it. I held him and caressed him and looked into his eyes, and I knew that he was gone. Now there's a big gaping hole in my heart, which I don't think will ever heal. But I consider myself blessed, truly, truly blessed, because this dog, my baby, my best friend, enlarged my broken heart. And maybe even with this big gaping hole in it, there's a little room left for just a fraction of the love that Siggy gave to me and everyone else he ever met. So thanks for listening to me talk about Siggy.
I'm back here like bawling, like I was just reading it for the first time. Thank you, Jason. I know how hard that was, and really just taking us into that moment. I mean, if you've ever lost a dog, you feel that deeply, just that sense of loss and that anticipatory grief that it's coming. It's one of the worst feelings in the world. It's so hard. So thank you for sharing again. I know it was, hard to share the first time, even if it was therapeutic, but, hearing your words and hearing you say it actually is even more powerful. And we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you. You guys are total saints, and all I can say is give all the money you can to Live Like Crew. They're really, really amazing people who have helped me and my family, and I know so many other families in a society that I think really undervalues life in general, but especially the lives of animals who are our family. So thank you. And thanks everybody for listening to me share a little bit about Siggy.
Yeah, incredible. Speaking of funds, I'll get you that 2,200 and some change, because I feel, for sharing and telling people about us and just, what you went through. I mean, you're a real asset to that support page now, going through the journey and then, having kind of this post Siggy knowledge and feelings. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. You're amazing.